In recent years, the world has experienced an unparalleled rate of change. The hyper-distribution of people, data and devices, the shift of data to the cloud and SaaS services, and the rapidly increasing sophistication of cyber attacks. As a result, organizations can be attacked and undermined from more entry points than ever before. We call this the attack surface, and it is bigger than ever before, more complex than ever before, and more vulnerable than ever before. Every once in a while, a technology comes along that fundamentally changes the game and turns the tide in our favor, the favor of the defenders and businesses. At its heart, XDR is a comprehensive cybersecurity approach that provides real-time threat detection and response across email, endpoints, networks, and cloud environments. Organizations are able to easily identify and mitigate security threats before they cause significant damage to their operations. XDR protects organizations from emerging threats and helps you stay ahead of all types of adversaries. Done correctly, XDR will provide an organization with three important business outcomes. Firstly, business resilience. By enabling security teams to identify and stop attacks quicker, the business remains operational and continues to service its customers. Secondly, business reputation. By ensuring your organization is not the next headline, this means that staff, customer, and shareholder confidence is protected. And thirdly, maintaining compliance. By utilizing XDR to shut down attacks quickly, the organization continues to protect its crown jewels, customer data. By doing so, it is able to remain compliant and avoid hefty financial and legal consequences. For security teams, there are also four important outcomes. Firstly, detecting threats sooner by understanding where you are most exposed and where the risk is greatest. Secondly, prioritizing threats by impact, dealing first with the attacks that represent the largest material impact on your business. Thirdly, speeding up investigations by understanding the full scope and entry vectors of the attack. And lastly, accelerating your response by harnessing AI and machine learning to automate response actions and provide remediation recommendations. Done correctly, XDR, whether managed in-house or through an expert security partner 24/7, has the ability to protect your business operations, your reputation, and your regulatory compliance. To understand how XDR could help your organization, get in touch, and one of our experts would be happy to help.
Hello, good morning and welcome. Thank you very much to everybody for joining us today on Logicalis's What is XDR webinar. I'm James Gillis and I'm going to be taking you through some of today's content. We are going to share some of our knowledge and experience, and it's our hope that what you will be able to get by seeing what we present to you today, you'll be able to walk away with a better understanding of what an XDR solution is, the key components that are involved, and start to think about for yourselves, what your current position is, your kind of as-is state, and potentially what an XDR solution could do for you in terms of covering those security gaps. So let's have a little look at today's agenda. So as I say, I'm going to take you through the first couple of sections. So I'm going to set the scene. We're going to talk about what we're seeing in the industry and what other people are seeing in the industry, and try and kind of provide some context behind some of those kind of stories that we hear about in the wild, why it continues to happen, and what keeps people up late at night. I'm also then going to use the MITRE attack framework to provide a little bit of context so that in some way kind of attempts to visualize for you what this attack surface looks like, what those security gaps look like, and how an XDR solution can help to reduce that exposure of that attack surface that you have. And then after that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague. I'm joined by Dave Dawson, who is going to provide some information on some real-world stories with XDR.
Thank you, James, and thank you everyone for attending today. As James mentioned, I'll be contextualising the information that James presents with some real-world scenarios. They'll demonstrate the power of XDR. My hope, personally, is that you'll then see the value that XDR can bring to your business. And with that, I'll hand back to James.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so before we get into the rest of the content, just to make everybody aware in the audience that we have a poll that we'll be providing within the UI that you can see there on the right-hand side. And we also have a Q&A kind of section towards the end of today's presentation. But feel free, if you're wanting to drop any questions that you might have inside of the chat, and we'll do our best to kind of field those as we go through. Okay, so without any further ado, so setting the scene really, as we've mentioned a couple of times already, where the attack surface is rapidly expanding, it's causing more problems than ever before for organizations, and as a result, the amount of time that you have to understand what your position is in terms of a threat that is evolving inside of your network, that is working through a kill chain, that ultimately can end up compromising you, is getting shorter and shorter. That kind of window of opportunity to be able to deal with it is becoming harder and harder to meet. So what XDR attempts to do is to cut through that noise. So rather than just having a meaningless kind of logs and alerts and not knowing where to kind of prioritize your efforts, XDR helps cut through that noise. It breaks down noise into kind of signal telemetry that makes it much easier for us to work with. So in terms of what we're seeing in the market, obviously Gartner has a view. Gartner always will have a view, and many people will look to what they're saying. And there's a couple of kind of key points, predictions that they've made for 2025 is that they anticipate global security spending increasing by 15% year on year, which is enormous. So this is covering all avenues of security, not just XDR. So this represents a magnificent, an order of magnitude greater amount of spending on cybersecurity technology. But at the same time, CISOs and C-suite executives are under increasing pressure to be able to kind of deal with those threats. And indeed, that is now being brought into their performance requirements and aligning with those business objectives. So in terms of what we're seeing out in the industry, here's an example of 5 of any of the top 10 worst cyber attacks that you could have seen in 2024. And this isn't intended to kind of pick on anybody in the top 5 that you've got here. This is just kind of an extract of what's out there. But some of the key takeaways and some of the kind of common themes that we're seeing, and as you read through the pillars of text there, is that you've got ransomware gangs, you've got different types of threat actors that are then holding organizations to ransom, they're extorting data, they're causing business disruption, and causing massive problems for those organizations all in all. And as you can see here, there's a few organizations that are UK based. But then all the same type of threat actor. You've got a mixture between criminal gangs that are using it for financial gain. You've got foreign state actors, and then you've got the kind of infamous script kiddie towards the right hand side. So you've got all these different types of threat actor that are compromising these environments. And it's not to say that the people that are up here, nobody wants to be on these top 5. It doesn't mean that they weren't doing anything. It doesn't mean they don't have any security controls in place. It doesn't mean they don't have any tooling or process, but they're still getting hit nonetheless. So why is that? Or how can we better understand why that might be? And in terms of understanding what our audience is saying to us, with the most recently launched Logicalis CIO report that's available today for download, Some of the key points that we've extracted out of that is, as you can see here highlighted, 96%, so basically everybody that we speak to in that CIO report feels the need to have better security coverage. So again, tackling that attack surface area. But at the same time, they also feel that perhaps they've overinvested. So they want a decent return on investment for those investments they've made in the technology. Okay, so a brief history of time to help understand, where XDR has come from, because XDR isn't necessarily a technology; it's more of a methodology. But it works as a group of technologies coming together. So before XDR, going right back to the beginning, if I kind of use circa 2010 up to 2021 and onwards, we have the SIEM platform. That's your 20,000 foot view. It's your early warning system. It's your great big bucket of logs where you're feeding all of your different types of security logging into. And what a SIEM platform attempts to do is to cut through that noise and give you an indication that something might be wrong. And that is absolutely fantastic at its job, and it has its place, and it will continue to have its place. But that was back then. What we then started to see the evolution of antivirus technology, even kind of next-gen antivirus technology, was the beginnings of EDR. So where EDR focuses on post-exploit, antivirus would focus on pre-exploit. So antivirus would try to stop the bad thing from happening in the first place, whereas EDR accepted that something bad would happen on the endpoints. It's where the users are. So kind of desktops, laptops, maybe servers, it's kind of where the human beings are. It's the most unhygienic part of the network. So it accepts that something will happen. So what do we do about it post-exploit? And what EDR did really well was to provide the tools to be able to perform triage at a much more narrow focus and deeper level to be able to understand what's happened, why it's happened, what can we do about it, how can we contain it, and then how can we recover a bit more effectively than before. XDR stands on the shoulders of success, essentially, of EDR, and expands the strengths of EDR, but beyond the endpoints. So looking at your other security domains. We'll go into that in a bit more detail as we go through. But essentially what you're able to do is take the capabilities of what we could do with EDR in terms of that visibility, that investigation, that triage, and response actions, but then to be able to apply it to the rest of our security estate where there may be other actions by the threat actor that are taking place. So in terms of in terms of seeing that journey from EDR, from SIEM through to EDR through to XDR, there's no kind of necessarily right way or wrong way of doing it, but this has been the gradual journey that we've seen. Okay, so at this point, I believe there is a video that we'd like to show to kind of set the scene here on what this might mean to you.
Mail fell victim to a ransom services company technology.
Security is tough for your business. You've got more to safeguard, more systems to oversee, more dashboards to check, and less time to do it all. It's a real challenge, and they're turning to you for answers. So here's the plan. Step 1, we streamline the tech. Bring everything together with Cisco XDR. Now we've got the full picture. Step 2, we bring in automation to pick up the pace. Quickly isolate compromised assets and tackle threats in real time. Lastly, we bolster your team by offering XDR as a service. Let Logicalis set up and run the XDR system, easing the security load on your business and freeing up your time. We're the first and only partner able to provide Cisco XDR as a global managed service, meaning if you operate internationally, we've got you covered. Our SOC teams seamlessly integrate Cisco security tools all in one place to enhance threat hunting capability, leading to faster resolution and simplified visibility. The pricing for MXDR is simple. Number of endpoints plus number of users equals a monthly managed fee. Unified, automated, managed.
Okay, so hopefully that's kind of giving you a little bit of an insight into what XDR is and what an MXDR solution can provide to you. But what I'd like to be able to do is kind of go into a little bit more detail of what that means in terms of kind of people's day-to-day. So like I said before, you have organizations that may already have tooling in place. You know, no one's got absolutely nothing, but everyone has day jobs. So you may have any number of different security tools that are running that are maybe creating logs, maybe creating alerts, but you're not necessarily getting around to dealing with those. The challenges that most organizations face that we're having conversations with them are around the time and expertise that they have to be able to understand what to do with those alerts and then actually deal with those alerts. So data and alert fatigue is absolutely crucial, and we see it time and time again. So what we're able to do, or what XDR can start to be able to do, is to start looking at what those components are that you might have that are able to be integrated into an XDR platform, so that you can start to reduce that data and alert fatigue and then start kind of transforming that into a more efficient response. So at this point, it might be worth just kind of asking you the question. Let's get you involved in terms of some of the challenges that you face on a day-to-day. This isn't intended to be technical, so by all means, you know, which one of these specific problems resonates most strongly with you? Because these are part and parcel of conversations that we have with our customers regularly. So feel free to have a look at the poll and let us know your thoughts. Okay, so in terms of providing some context behind this attack surface, this ever-expanding attack surface, I thought it would be good to be able to use the MITRE attack framework, a little bit of a 101 to provide some context around that. Everyone's heard of the MITRE attack framework, and everybody that's on the call may have some technologies that apparently align to the MITRE attack framework, and that's fantastic. But what does that really mean? What does that really look like? So MITRE Ingenuity is an organization in the US, and they developed the MITRE attack framework to provide a common set of cybersecurity and security terminology so that vendors and security professionals and businesses could organize themselves and be able to discuss security matters and incidents using a common set of terms and phrases that would work for any type of technology that was being used. So it kind of set a level playing field. And in doing so, what this then allowed to happen is the development of much more in-depth, much more meaningful and contextualized incident reporting that you would see out in the industry, that people regularly read in order to be able to keep up on what's happening in the world around them, because not everybody's an expert, right? So by the example here, you can see some of the so-called tactics that the threat actors in a given attack were using in order to be able to compromise the customer's environment. And depending on the types of tactic, the way they go about the compromise is that they create behaviors for themselves that allows that threat actor or that adversary to be able to be fingerprinted in many ways, so they can be identified as a known group. So you start having these kind of random names that you see out in the industry that pertains to the type of threat actor that they might be. So let's get into that in a little bit more detail. What does that actually mean? So what you're looking at here is one of the matrices. This is the enterprise matrix for the MITRE attack framework. And I'm not going to go into what all the boxes mean, but essentially the left to the right-hand side is covering the different tactics that the threat actor is going through in order to compromise an environment. These are the different stages of the so-called kill chain that they will go through. A threat actor doesn't do just one thing and then they've compromised your environment. They have to work through a number of different goals or objectives to be able to get to their end goal. And their end goal could be holding the network to ransom or exfiltrating data or both. So the tactics go from the left to the right, which represents the columns there. And then with the arrows coming up from the bottom, you can see how they go about it. So these are the techniques, the TTPs, tactics, techniques, and procedures. So not only what is the threat actor trying to do, but how do they go about it? And by being able to understand from the threat actor's perspective what it is they're trying to do, the MITRE attack framework is then able to identify those TTPs, which then the tooling is able to then start providing context against. So in terms of a pseudo attack, I'm using kind of an example here of supply chain compromise. Here is a kill chain that shows a threat actor stepping through all the different objectives that they're trying to achieve to get to their ultimate goal. So it may not be apparent here, but the good way to think about this is maybe think of this as a timeline as well. On the left-hand side, nothing's really happened yet, or it's all quiet on the Western Front, and all is well with the world. But as the threat actor moves through the kill chain, things are becoming more serious. And as you get to the far right-hand side, right to the end, this is the worst-case scenario. You're on the 6 o'clock news. It's really bad. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to detect and then shut down that kill chain as quickly as possible. So further to the left is best, because then it's easier, it's quicker, it's more cost-effective, and there's less damage done. But conversely, as you go to the right-hand side, it's harder to detect, because otherwise you would have done already. The problem is more serious. The impact is greater because it's spread, and then the cost of recovery is also greater. So what we're trying to do is to provide a way of being able to shut this kill chain down as quickly as possible. So by way of a visualization, a well-configured and comprehensive XDR solution, which is made up of a number of different components, will cover the types of gaps that you can see here on the screen. So those kind of red boxes that have appeared, those are typically the types of tactic that would be covered through the detection mechanisms that an XDR solution can provide. So if you think about where those red boxes intersect with the arrows here, these are all the other opportunities that we would have had to shut down that kill chain. So like I say, we could shut it right down on the left-hand side here, but equally at different stages of the kill chain. So we've talked about what XDR kind of is in a high level, what it sets out to achieve. But what are the components? What are the moving parts that are involved? So like I mentioned earlier, XDR is an evolution of EDR. We took the good practices from EDR and expanded it to other security domains. This is where we expanded from the endpoints, but not only to the users' identities, to cloud applications, to cloud workloads, to networking, email, download links, and so on and so forth. That kill chain that I showed you earlier, the threat actor isn't necessarily just looking to compromise an endpoint. They're looking at hundreds of different possibilities. So XDR provides that kind of same coverage, but across all of those additional security domains. So in terms of the use cases that we're actually trying to address, what does XDR fix? So if we speak to Cisco's messaging here, in terms of the XDR use cases, there's 5 of them, 5 key use cases that we're looking to address. And the first 3 are your main priorities. We're looking to detect sooner. We're looking to provide greater visibility within the security estate. And then in so doing, when we have a detection, we can then prioritize much more easily our remediation efforts. So as you can see here, accompanying the boxes, some of the questions that you should be asking yourself. And then once we've got those things straight, we can start to reduce the amount of investigation time. So rather than taking hours, days and weeks to be able to perform an investigation and our cleanup and our recovery, we can accelerate that response. So you're looking for orders of magnitude more SecOps efficiency. So speaking about SecOps efficiency, what does it matter? Why does that mean something to me? I've got tooling in place, right? I've got alerting and so on. But this is the point, and this is what we're trying to get to. Without an XDR solution in place, you may have a dozen different other point solutions doing a dozen different things that need to be investigated and triaged separately, siloed, possibly by different teams with different skill sets. And this all starts to add up to the amount of time that it takes to understand your threat position. So when you take the telemetry, the signals that all of those different solutions may be providing and bring them together under one platform, you can start to drive the SecOps efficiency by an order of magnitude. So we can bring that time of investigation down to under 5 minutes, because we're able to understand the context between all those different signals across all of those different security domains at the same time. And then in doing so, prioritize our efforts in terms of what it is we need to be able to do to shut down and then contain and then remediate. So this is the most technical slide that we're going to show you, but it just gives you an idea of the kind of high-level architecture of the sorts of things you would expect to see in an XDR solution. So whether you have a combination of good old-fashioned on-premises technology or hybrid on-prem, mixed with maybe a piece of public cloud, whatever that might be, and the workloads that you might have there, whether you're looking at networking telemetry, maybe from your firewalls or other parts of the network, whether you're looking at remote workers and what they're doing, whether you're bringing in intelligence feeds that you may already be subscribed to, or where we talk about first party versus third party telemetry from other vendors. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full wall-to-wall Cisco solution. It could be made up of a number of different vendors that you've already invested in. We can bring all of that telemetry together because all that telemetry will be aligned to the MITRE attack framework. So you're picking up your TTPs, and then that all comes together into that single platform to provide the visibility and then the understanding and the context behind what that's showing you. So in terms of what you're able to do with that, you can start to address those use cases that we spoke about earlier. So at this point, what I'd like to do is to hand over to my colleague Dave, who is going to discuss some real-world stories with you. XDR in action. Thanks, Dave.
As James mentioned, for the next 5 slides, I would like to talk you through 5 scenarios where we, as Logicalis, have seen XDR used to good effect, and it's helped customers see the value within their tooling. So in this first example, a CFO, unbeknownst to him, has his email compromised, a fraudulent email sent for a payment request. But because XDR is working beyond the endpoint, we're able to look at the suspicious logins and the email rules that change within the email platform. The behavior is then correlated with known attack patterns, and the XDR is used to isolate the compromised account. Leadership is informed of the issue and the funds are protected. So the outcomes for this for the customer were that financial loss was avoided, there wasn't any customer or partner impact, and there was executive trust was maintained, as was the reputation. But it could have been very different. Imagine for a second if XDR wasn't in play. This could have caused a fraudulent transaction, but it would have been noticed too late. Customers and partners would have been alerted after the funds are lost, which meant regulatory reporting and forensic investigation would be required. The executive team then faces reputational damage, as well as potential legal consequences. In the next example, we're going to look at a head of faculty for an educational facility. Unfortunately, they fall victim to a phishing attack, which leads to malware being downloaded to their endpoint. The process is then executed, but the endpoint protection flags that there's abnormal behavior. Using the XDR platform, we're able to correlate the behavior of that threat with known indicators, and our SOC were then able to isolate the endpoint and begin forensics. Because XDR was in play, there was zero downtime, there was no data loss. There was an avoidance of any need for ransomware demands or recovery costs, and a PR crisis was averted. But again, imagine for a moment if XDR wasn't in play. Malware could have encrypted the entire network before discovery. We all know that storage operates faster than ever, so the potential for that lateral movement is more of a risk than ever before. There could have been downtime across departments for days, potentially even weeks. And if the educational establishment had chosen to, there could have been costly negotiations with threat actors. Now, I personally would never recommend that you enter negotiations with threat actors because we as Logicalis see more and more data broker activity, and often people don't actually get their data back. But that leads to potential for media exposure, compliance fines, and reputational damage. For the next example, we're going to look at a disgruntled employee that works within food manufacturing. So a departing employee accesses a number of sensitive files, and this isn't normal behaviour or activity. The XDR platform also notices an amount of privilege abuse and anomalies are detected within their behaviour. Alerts are triggered on unusual access and sharing attempts. So the user in this scenario was essentially accessing data that they wouldn't access normally, and they were trying to share that outside of the company's data domain. Logicalis were able to pick up on this pattern because they were looking at the MXDR alerts, and they were able to escalate that to leadership. As a result of that, access was revoked, and any exfiltration was actually prevented. So proprietary assets, in this scenario, let's say, for example, proprietary food recipes were protected. There's no legal or compliance risks, they've all been avoided, and it does show to the executive teams a clear demonstration of due diligence for the IT teams and the governance of that data. But again, let's imagine for a moment that XDR wasn't in play. The potential impact could be that sensitive intellectual property, or even potentially customer data, is leaked and sold externally. As mentioned before, we do see an increase of broker activity on the dark web. That could lead to a competitive disadvantage, or even potentially a breach of contract. This is going to lead your shareholders to hold you to a certain amount of scrutiny, and it's going to cause reputational damage or harm. Not to mention any legal costs or fines due to compliance failures. In the next example, we're going to look at a financial institution. Their DevOps engineers are working on a pensions platform, and there was a misconfiguration during an update. But because of XDR being in play, it was identified in real time. XDR, again operating beyond the endpoints, was able to correlate unauthorized access attempts using the identity sources. And using Logicalis' managed XDR platform, we were able to auto-remediate, enforcing secure configuration of that policy, of that platform. A governance report was then delivered to the compliance team so they were aware that there had been a potential issue. So the outcomes here, a data breach was avoided, compliance was maintained, and it does demonstrate proactive cloud governance. But again, let's imagine for a second that XDR wasn't in play. The data could have been exposed or even downloaded by external third parties. That would lead to a public breach disclosure being required, which can be costly, as we know. There'd be a loss of customer confidence and regulatory penalties. Also, there would be business interruption while patching vulnerabilities, because obviously the platform needs to be taken down, the vulnerabilities need to be patched. Now we're going to look at a national infrastructure supplier. In this scenario, the SCADA network was actually compromised, so a vendor connected to an internal endpoint using their own device, and their endpoint that they were using was actually infected with malware. Because we were able to pick up intelligence from the network in this instance, we were able to look at suspicious lateral movement. The traffic that we saw on the network was correlated with known attack indicators. And because of that, our SOC were able to block access and begin the incident response. As a result of this, the national infrastructure supplier was able to look at third-party access controls. They're able to review and update those to make sure that anyone connecting to their networks, whether SCADA or Office networks, had more strict security controls. So the outcome here is that any threat was contained pre-breach. The vendor risk management was strengthened, and there was zero service interruption. But again, let's imagine for a moment that XDR wasn't in play. If the attacker had used that vendor access to infiltrate a core system and then used lateral movement, they could have created a critical data compromise. They could have even taken down large parts of a production network. Obviously, this could lead to a termination or a strained relationship with a vendor, which when you're talking about legacy SCADA systems, such as used in manufacturing, as used in national infrastructure, can be difficult to find. But the business could also suffer reputational damage. There'd be huge fallout and potential lawsuits. As an infrastructure supplier, you're contractually obliged to supply certain things, such as power, such as water, and any interruption to that service does mean that you can be held accountable. So in conclusion, why does XDR matter to our customers? Well, we've spoken about it multiple times. Reputation is really important. Reputation of your company in order to be able to operate business, but also your reputation amongst your customers. Are they happy that their data, or that personal data, is safe? Time. Any breach leads to time. It could be time that your platforms are down. It could be time that's used by your professional teams in order to resolve a compromise or to patch any issues that are caused by compromise within your network. And money. Money is always a problem, whether you're talking about time, whether you're talking about fines, whether you're talking about the need to take down platforms. A breach will cost you money. And confidence. Not just confidence in the platforms that you have in order to protect you, but also confidence in your customers, confidence with teams within the company that IT are actually doing what they need to do in order to maintain a safe and secure network. So with that, it leads to the question, how can we help you?
Thanks, Dave.
I'm going to hand back to James. Sorry, James.
That's okay. Thanks very much. So now that we've kind of got an understanding of what is XDR, what are the kind of components in play, understanding some of the kind of real world stories, how can we help you? What's your position? What's your as is state? Where do you sit in that space? And I thought a way to visualize that is, this is a rather busy looking slide, admittedly, and we use this slide often when we're speaking to our customers, and we can sometimes spend 20 minutes going through it. We use it for all different reasons. But what I'd like to try and draw your attention to is that essentially when an organization starts building infrastructure, start building things, they will start on the left-hand side, having no security wrap around it at all. And then as their infrastructure, as their overall maturity posture or security posture matures, they start to move through these different pillars of SOC maturity. And we can help out with a number of those different levels towards the right-hand side. However, on the right-hand side, this is really aspirational stuff. This is kind of really kind of niche, and there's only kind of certain types of organizations that will get right onto the right-hand side here. But you would be surprised how often and how many organizations are towards the left-hand side of this diagram in terms of that security curve that you can see, that kind of black curve. So where does XDR fit in all of this? And for the eagle-eyed amongst you might already have spotted it, but there's XDR there. So it looks quite small, and it shouldn't be underestimated as to how much coverage and how much this puts the advantage back into your favor as the defender against the threat actors that are out there. And what I wanted to do is to kind of visualize for you that whilst an organization may be on their security journey, XDR is actually pretty far into that curve. But in terms of the coverage it provides, how you can help close down those security gaps. This is why we showed you that kind of MITRE attack framework to kind of show you that attack surface. So whilst in this image here, it looks like XDR is just one little thing that sits on its own, just again, remember that coverage that it provides. In terms of the conversations that we have with our customers, we generally are able to work with them on all of those other items that you can see in green amongst our other managed security services that we provide, XDR just being one of those plays. Again, to provide context, how do we help you? More often than not, when we speak to our customers, as you'll see here, this is about as far as they've got. It's really normal for organizations to only have covered those core items that you see in red. And again, in terms of context, think back to that person we saw, the guy with the headache, the data and the alert fatigue, because that's as far as they've got. They may have some of the tooling in place, but it's all siloed. And so they might have some of the technology, but they don't have the process and they don't have the people. And that's where an XDR solution, possibly backed by a managed service to operate that for you, comes into its own. So in terms of how we can help you in that, understanding that as is state, you may be wondering, well, what are we doing? How can we understand, what our strengths are, what our possible weaknesses are, what are our gaps? How have we respond properly? Well, we've put together for you, free of charge, we're calling it the MXDR Readiness Assessment. It's available to download today. We can provide you a link to the form, which we will put into the chat for you in a couple of minutes' time. But essentially what this will help you do is it will take you less than 10 minutes. It's not technical, it's not onerous, but it will help us provide to you back a nice glossy 2-pager output that's customized to the answers that you provide in that 25-question survey. And we cover the 5 key areas of MXDR. So it touches on those different things that we talked about today, which is not just about the tooling, but also about the process and the people. How ready are you to be able to defend against that ever-expanding attack surface? And from then onwards, if it's something that's of further interest to you, we can speak to you about Cisco's security assessment, where we can look further into your estate. We can start to work out what are those gaps, what do those gaps really look like from a technology perspective, and how can we build upon that to give you a roadmap for a more increased security posture over time. So with that, I would like to see if we have any questions from the audience. I'm going to put the link into the chat as well for any of you that might be interested in the MXDR readiness assessment.
We have a couple of questions, James. First one that I can see, it's up on screen. How does XDR integrate with existing security tools and infrastructure? And are there challenges with interoperability or vendor lock-in? The good news is that Cisco XDR actually has a number of what's the word that I'm looking for, James? I've just
integrations.
Sorry?
Integrations,
thank you. Integrations. You can actually check, but yes, there are a number of integrations. If an integration doesn't exist, we can then talk to Cisco directly. Most of the time, if it's API RESTful integration, then that's something that we can work with. So no, not really. There isn't really any vendor lock-in to speak of. Obviously, it works very well with Cisco tooling, but it does work with other platforms as well, so that shouldn't be a concern.
Yeah, and again, that was the advantage of the MITRE attack framework being used to provide that alignment across all the different vendors. So there's almost like a level of neutrality between them. So it doesn't matter if vendor A is speaking about a particular type of TTP, because it will mean the same thing in vendor B's tooling. And then the way you go about that will then also be the same, because your approach to the remediation and the mitigation will then be the same as well. Okay, what are the key considerations or first steps I should take before starting an XDR implementation? Okay, so as I said before, a well-rounded XDR solution is not just about the technology, but also the people in the process, because you can have tooling firing away there, but it just might be firing at alerts that nobody's looking at, or those alerts are not being tuned, or the response is not being optimized, or you may not have the skills to be able to deal with those alerts in the first place, or any playbooks to back it up to say, well, what do we do when there's a real attack happening? What do we actually do? Or are we just running around like headless chickens and the loudest voice in the room wins? And that's not me being sarcastic. I've seen that happen. And so you need to be better prepared than that. So in terms of your approach for an XDR solution, you do want to understand what is your as-is state. So that's not only understanding, well, what tooling do we have in place, but what do we have in terms of the skills? What do we have in terms of the coverage for working hours and outside of working hours? How would we respond outside of working hours? And then what processes have we got behind that in order to be able to deal with the thing that happens when the thing happens? Because it's never going to happen at a convenient time, right? So this is where the MXDR readiness assessment that we've spoken about earlier may help you get an idea as to kind of where those challenges that you might face are, and we can then have that conversation with you to help kind of drive that increased posture. In your view, what does great look like from an XDR program, and how can organizations measure success? Okay, so one of the questions that I've spoken to customers before who are thinking of implementing a SOC and or understanding, what are their capabilities and how do we get to the next stage of maturity, which may involve implementing a SOC, whether that's internal or whether that's external. So one of the questions that comes up is, how do you measure a SOC's effectiveness? And of course, one of the key answers to that is going to be the time to detect and time to resolve. So those are kind of some of the key metrics that you would be able to use to understand, how effective is your implementation. And this goes back to what we've been saying all the way through for the last half an hour or so, and in terms of that SecOps efficiency. How quickly can you detect something, and then what level of visibility have you got across the security estate? Because if you can see everything and you can detect quickly, you've got a much better chance of being able to shut those kill chains down earlier on in that process, like I showed you before with the arrow that goes through from left to right. Without that, you're on the other end of the scale where you don't have the visibility and you're not detecting things quickly enough, in which case things get worse. And worst case scenario, by the time you're aware of something's happening, it may already be too late.
That's a great question, Charlie. So Cisco XDR uses features such as the encrypted visibility engine and encryption policies in order to look at encrypted traffic without breaking any protocol. So hopefully that answers your question.
Can a solution identify forged or spoofed certificates in real time? I don't know that off the top of my head. I'll have to take that away and find out. That's a pretty specific technical question. That's a great question though. But if we can get the contact details for that person, I'm absolutely sure we can follow up on that one.
I think that's all of the questions, James. I think it's pertinent to mention, obviously, we do have a poll that's still open. Anyone that hasn't already answered, please get your answers in, just because it'd be really interesting for us to know.
Okay, so here's the answers. Which one of these problems resonates most strongly with you? So it looks pretty strong in terms of 75% are concerned with are there other leaky parts of the network. So that's speaking to the unknown unknowns, right? Not necessarily having the visibility. So what are we doing about the bits that we can't see? And so in terms of that use cases for XDR, this is what we're talking about. You're extending that visibility across the estate. So Again, from a non-technical perspective, XDR isn't a technology, it's a collection of technologies, it's a methodology, and you can start small and you can always expand upon. Similar to kind of SIEM infrastructure, the more signal telemetry that you can introduce from different security domains, the greater visibility you have, and then the greater chance you've got of being able to detect something quicker. And this is why we talk about starting at the endpoints with EDR, but then expanding into identities, then looking at cloud apps, looking at email, looking at links, looking at browsing, and then you can start to look at other parts of the network that might be leaking, so that you can detect, where else on the kill chain do you need a control against. And that's where that MITRE attack framework comes into play. You can use that to understand, well, here is where we see ourselves in terms of the threats that we could be facing, and here's where we know we've got security controls that can help provide additional coverage. And XDR is just part of that overall security posture, but like we've shown earlier, it provides a decent amount of coverage. Okay, so that was the results of the poll. Thank you very much for your time. So in terms of closing out, Dave and I would like to thank you very much for your time, and absolutely, we would encourage you to have a look at the MXDR readiness assessment. As I say, less than 5-10 minutes of your time. We'll provide back to you the glossy 2-pager output, which is customized to the answers across those 5 key areas of MXDR, and how we can help you achieve a more mature posture in terms of your SecOps efficiency and your ability to deal with threats as they come through. Thank you very much for your time.